Colonel Sarah Blake stood at the edge of Earth's last military stronghold, staring out at the empty battlefield where Earth's greatest defenders should have been. The vast complex of interconnected ships, satellites, and battle stations that once formed the backbone of humanity's defense now lay eerily still. Not a single soldier in sight. Not a single ship in orbit. The signals that once tracked the enemy had gone dark. And above her, the sky, normally a frantic blur of motion and technology, was disturbingly empty. The unthinkable had happened. Earth had been abandoned, her communicator buzzed. It was a secure message from General Carrick, the last surviving commander of the Earth Defense Force, though she knew his title meant little now. The military had fractured long before the Council's betrayal. Colonel Carrick's voice crackled through the static. "Get to the Citadel. We have to talk. It's worse than we thought. Much worse." Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her breath steady. She had always known something was off. The Council's sudden decision to withdraw all forces from Earth, leaving the planet unprotected against the incoming alien onslaught, never made sense. But this? The sheer abandonment of humanity's homeworld? This was no decision. It was a condemnation. She keyed her thruster pack, lifting off the ground with practiced ease, heading toward the last bastion of Earth's defense. The Citadel, a colossal fortress orbiting above, housed the final remnants of Earth's military leadership. But Sarah knew that the leadership had been rendered impotent long ago. The Council had been pulling strings behind the scenes, ensuring Earth's fall. She had suspected it for weeks. But now, she had proof. As she approached the Citadel's docking bay, her mind flashed to the days before the invasion, the days when Earth was still alive with hope, when soldiers marched through the streets with pride, and humanity's future seemed assured. She remembered the speeches of the Council, promising protection, security, unity in the face of an inevitable alien threat. Their words, now hollow, echoed in her mind. The doors to the docking bay slid open with a hiss, and Sarah was greeted by an unsettling quiet. No guards, no officers, just an empty hallway. "General Carrick," she called out, her voice reverberating against the cold metal walls. That a shadow appeared at the far end of the hall, moving with the deliberate pace of someone weighed down by far too many burdens. General Carrick emerged, his face grim and hollowed by sleepless nights and too many decisions he never wished to make. "Colonel," he said, his voice rough, "you were right. The Council, they didn't just pull our forces. They sold us out." Sarah's stomach turned, her suspicion now confirmed. "What do you mean, sold us out, General?" Carrick didn't answer immediately. He simply gestured for her to follow him into a briefing room. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud, sealing them in the sterile space. "Take a look at this," Carrick said, activating a holographic display. A galaxy map flickered to life in front of them, the colors swirling and shifting as if alive. The map showed Earth, his home, her home, and then zoomed out, revealing several alien fleets making their way toward the planet. But the troubling part wasn't the alien fleets. It was the Council's ships. The military that was supposed to be stationed here defending humanity. They were moving away from Earth. "That I don't understand," Sarah said. "Why? Why would they do this?" Carrick's face twisted in anger. "It's a bargain, Colonel. Earth was always just a pawn. The Council gave us up in exchange for something they believed would protect them. They've made deals with the very forces that are coming to destroy us. And now it's too late." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "So, they just abandoned us?" "Not just that," Carrick said, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "They signed away Earth's future, in exchange for their own survival. And they think the galaxy won't notice. But they're wrong. This isn't just a betrayal of Earth. It's a betrayal of everything we've fought for." The weight of his words settled like lead in Sarah's chest. The military wasn't coming. The Council had abandoned them. And the invaders, an alien empire unlike anything humanity had ever faced, were already on their way. She turned to the display, her eyes locking on Earth's fragile position in the vast galaxy. It was all up to her now. Earth would not fall without a fight. The question was, could she rally what was left of humanity to face the greatest threat they'd ever known? Or had the Council's betrayal truly doomed them all? "Get ready, General," Sarah said, a cold fire igniting in her chest. "We've got work to do." Colonel Sarah Blake stood in the heart of the Galactic Council's command center, surrounded by towering holographic displays and sterile metal walls that seemed to echo with the weight of 1,000 decisions. But there was no one left to make the decisions now. The seats of power, once filled with resolute leaders, were empty. Of the 20 representatives who once governed the galaxy's most powerful empire, only 5 remained. One of them, an aging and disheveled diplomat named Tarl Vanna, looked up from a terminal, his tired eyes meeting Sarah's with an expression that mirrored the shame in her chest. "Colonel Blake," Vanner said, his voice rough, "we didn't want it to come to this. But you must understand, we had no choice." Sarah's pulse quickened, her heart thudding in her ears. She had heard the rumors, the whispered accusations, but hearing them spoken aloud felt like a blow. "No choice," she repeated, her voice ice cold. "You gave up Earth. You left us to die. Why?" Vanner hesitated, his hands trembling as he lowered his gaze. "You think we didn't care? That we abandoned you for our own survival? It's not that simple, Colonel. We've been negotiating with the Kreisel Empire for months. The very empire that's on its way to Earth. And we've learned something about them, something terrifying." Sarah's eyes narrowed. The Kreisel Empire was a name spoken in fear across the galaxy, a species of advanced conquerors with a thirst for annihilation. Earth's defenders had always been prepared for an eventual confrontation with them. But the idea that the Council had been negotiating with them was almost too much to process. "That you're telling me you made a deal with the Kreisel?" Sarah's voice was nearly a whisper, disbelief flooding her thoughts. What could possibly justify sacrificing humanity for their benefit? Tarl Vanner swallowed hard, his face lined with the years of political maneuvering and broken promises. "We didn't want this. The Kreisel made it clear, either we gave up Earth, or they would destroy our entire alliance. The alternative was worse. We thought we could hold them off, but we misjudged their strength, their tactics. Our fleet couldn't stop them. And the Kreisel knew it. We needed time to prepare. Earth was a bargaining chip. A bargaining chip." Sarah felt the rage building in her chest, a cold, simmering fury she hadn't known was possible. "You sold out our people for a chance at saving your own skins." The diplomat nodded somberly. "Yes. The truth is, Colonel, Earth was always a target. It was never a matter of if, only when. The Kreisel would have destroyed Earth regardless. But we thought if we gave them the planet, the Kreisel would spare our systems, leave us intact. We were wrong." Sarah clenched her fists, her fingers biting into her palms. The bitter taste of betrayal surged through her. The Council had sealed humanity's fate without so much as a second thought. The billions of lives on Earth had been weighed against the survival of the galaxy's most influential figures. And Earth had lost. "How many of you knew about this?" Sarah asked, her voice low and dangerous. Tarl Vanner looked up, his eyes filled with a kind of weary resignation. "Most of us. The military, the Council leadership, we were all part of it. Some believed we could strike a better deal. Some didn't care. But we all made the choice. Earth was sacrificed because we thought it was the only way to save everything else." Sarah's mind reeled as the weight of the revelation sank in. The galaxy, her home, had been thrown into a game of political survival. Earth's defenders, her comrades, her family, had been abandoned as collateral damage in a war they weren't even prepared for. And now, the Kreisel were coming, and what do we do now? Sarah's voice was colder than before, but she could hear the desperation in it. "What do I tell the survivors? The millions of civilians who were left to fend for themselves?" Vanna stepped forward, his expression desperate. "We need to fight back, Colonel. The Council has made its choice. But you, Earth's military, you are our last hope. We can't undo the past, but maybe we can stop the Kreisel from completely wiping you out." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. There was no undoing the betrayal. No taking back the council's decision. But if there was a chance to survive, a chance to take back what was theirs, Sarah knew she had to seize it. She had no other choice. "That I'm not fighting for you," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "I'm fighting for Earth. I'm fighting for humanity. And if I have to tear the galaxy apart to do it, I will." Vanner's face softened with a kind of grim respect. "Then we have no time to waste. The Kreisel fleet is on its way, and they won't stop until they've wiped you out. The only chance you have is to stop them before they land." Sarah turned on her heel, her resolve hardening like steel. The council had failed, but humanity had not. "We'll find a way," she said, "and we'll make them regret ever making Earth a pawn." With that, she left the council chambers, the weight of their betrayal driving her forward. Earth would not fall. Not today. Not Eve. The skies over Earth were darkening, but not with the usual twilight. This was something else. Something far worse. Colonel Sarah Blake stood on the bridge of the Resolute, the flagship of Earth's remaining forces, staring out at the vast expanse of space. Her eyes traced the path of the incoming alien fleet, a formation of gleaming ships that outnumbered humanity's defenses 10-1. The Kreisel were coming. Sarah's hands tightened around the railing in front of her, her knuckles white. She'd heard the reports, seen the data. The Kreisel had conquered worlds faster than any species before them. Entire planets had fallen in days, their populations decimated, their governments shattered. Earth would be no different unless she could stop them. "Status report," Sarah barked, her voice cutting through the low hum of the command center. Lieutenant Daniels, a young officer with a face too pale for the weight of what he was about to say, looked up from his console. "The Kreisel fleet is approaching fast, Colonel. We have 2 hours before they reach the outer atmosphere. The outer defense grid is intact, but our inner defenses are compromised." Sarah's mind raced. The council had left them with a skeleton crew and limited resources, but the enemy was relentless. It was clear now that Earth's defense strategy, if there ever was one, had been a fantasy. Their military might was a mere speck compared to the forces bearing down on them. "We'll hold the line," Sarah said, her voice harder than steel. "Get me Commander Holt." "Commander Holt is still en route from the Northern Defense Base, Colonel," Daniels replied, a hint of concern creeping into his tone. "But the bulk of our forces were scattered in the retreat. We're all that's left." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to push back the anger building inside her. The council's betrayal stung deeper with every passing minute, but now wasn't the time for recriminations. It was time to act. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "Activate the anti-orbital defense cannons. I want every ship ready to launch within the hour. We're not giving up Earth without a fight." "Yes, Colonel," Daniels said, nodding quickly as he relayed the orders. Sarah turned back to the viewport, watching as the enemy fleet grew larger with every passing second. It wasn't just the number of ships that was terrifying. It was their sheer size and firepower. The Kreisel had mastered the art of war, using brutal efficiency and overwhelming force to crush any who stood in their way. The reports from planets they had previously attacked were clear. They showed no mercy. They killed everything and everyone. She had only one choice. "Fight, Colonel," Lieutenant Daniels called again, his voice tense. "We're picking up a transmission. It's coming through the secured military channels." That Sarah's heart skipped. "Put it on." That a crackling sound filled the room, followed by the distorted voice of General Carrick, Earth's last remaining high-ranking officer. "Sarah, if you're hearing this, then we're already too late. The Kreisel don't just come to conquer, they come to erase. Every life on Earth is at risk. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would happen like this." Sarah's grip on the console tightened, her jaw clenched. The general's words stung, but she had no time for sympathy. "General," she replied, speaking into the comms with as much authority as she could muster, "we've got one chance to stop this. We need you to gather any remaining forces you can and rendezvous with the Resolute. We're going to fight back." Another crackle on the line, followed by Carrick's voice again. I'm not sure how much longer we can hold. You need to know the Council's betrayal. It goes deeper than we thought. The Kreisel have more than just ships. They have something else, something even more dangerous. Sarah's blood ran cold. What do you mean? We'll talk when I get there, Carrick said grimly, his voice suddenly urgent. Just know, Sarah, we're up against something we never saw coming. And Earth is far more important to the Kreisel than you realize. The transmission cut off, leaving a deep unease in its wake. Sarah stood still, processing the general's words. What could be worse than the Kreisel fleet itself? And why did they care so much about Earth? She didn't have the answers yet, but she would. And when she did, she'd make sure the Kreisel never made it to the planet's surface, sir. Daniels called again, his voice shaking slightly. The Kreisel are entering the atmosphere. Their first wave is about to land. The cold reality of the situation set in. Earth was about to be invaded, and she had no way of knowing how much longer their defenses would last. But Sarah had made a promise to herself, and to every person still alive on this planet. She wasn't going to let Earth fall. All hands to stations, Sarah said firmly. Prepare to repel the invasion. This is our home, and we will defend it, no matter the cost. As the command center sprang into motion, Sarah's gaze lingered on the viewport one last time. The Kreisel were here, and Earth's final stand was about to begin. This battle was only the beginning, and the stakes were higher than anyone could possibly know. Colonel Sarah Blake moved through the darkened hallways, her boots echoing off the cold metal floor. The once vibrant heart of the Galactic Council's command had now turned into an abandoned shell, the walls barren of the usual bureaucratic display. Only the dim emergency lights illuminated the path ahead. The defeat was palpable in every corner of the structure, every flicker of failing tech. It felt like the galaxy itself had died with the Council's decision to abandon Earth. That Sarah's mind raced. The Kreisel were here, descending upon Earth in waves. Yet, in this desolate command center, the real enemy was not just the alien fleet on the horizon. It was the Council itself. That as she reached the central chamber, she noticed the door to the war room slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside, her gaze immediately drawn to the holographic displays flickering weakly before her. The technology, once the pinnacle of galactic achievement, now seemed outdated, as if time itself had abandoned it. General Carrick, she called, her voice steady despite the tension gnawing at her. She could feel his presence before she even saw him from the far side of the room. General Carrick looked up. His face was drawn with exhaustion, his eyes haunted by the weight of the information he had yet to share. He stood beside a holographic table, fingers hovering over an ancient-looking datapad. The air between them crackled with unspoken words. That I was hoping you'd come, Carrick said, his voice low. The truth we've been trying to keep from you. It's worse than we thought. The Council's betrayal wasn't just a political move. They didn't just give Earth up to the Kreisel. They handed us over to something far more insidious. Sarah's stomach tightened. What are you saying? What could be worse than this? Carrick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured for her to sit. As she did, he brought the datapad to life. A series of encrypted files popped up, each marked with the highest level of secrecy. These weren't typical war plans. These were documents that detailed the origins of the Council's negotiations with the Kreisel and something even darker hidden beneath the surface. V tapped one file, and it expanded into a galaxy map. This was no ordinary map, though. It displayed a series of stars and planets, many of which Sarah had never heard of. At the center of the map, there was a blinking red dot. Earth, the Kreisel aren't the only ones in this war, Carrick began, his voice growing somber. They've made alliances with an ancient power, one that's been watching humanity for a long time. The Council didn't just trade Earth to them. They handed us over to a race older than the galaxy itself. A race that can manipulate time, space, and reality itself. Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding. What do you mean, who are they? Carrick's eyes met hers, and for the first time, She saw the deep regret and fear in them. The unseen ones. They've been hiding in the shadows of the galaxy for millennia. They can alter the very fabric of space and time. The Kreisel have made a pact with them. And that's what they want with Earth. The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. The unseen ones were nothing more than a myth, an ancient species whispered about in old galactic legends. Few believed they even existed. But if the Council had really made a deal with them, Earth had never been in more danger. How do you know this? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, as though speaking the name of the unseen ones might invoke them. That I found records, hidden in Council archives, Carrick said. Documents buried for centuries. The unseen ones gave the Kreisel the ability to wipe out entire worlds, manipulate galactic events, and even shape the future. But there's a price to pay for such power. Earth wasn't just a target. Earth was a key to unlocking their full potential. They believe we hold the answer to their victory in this war. Sarah's mind reeled. The implications were staggering. The Kreisel, already deadly and ruthless, had an ancient, godlike power backing them. And Earth? It wasn't just a target, it was a pawn in a much larger, far more dangerous game. She had to know more. She had to find a way to stop this before it was too late. How do we stop them? She asked, her voice tinged with desperation. That Carrick's gaze softened. That's the problem. We don't. Not yet, at least. But there's a way to fight back. A way to disrupt the unseen one's influence. That he pulled up another set of files. This one much older than the previous ones. These documents were written in an ancient language. One that even Carrick had trouble reading. But there was one thing Sarah recognized. A symbol, ancient and circular, burned into the documents. This symbol, Carrick said, is the key. It's tied to a place in the galaxy. An ancient world that once served as a refuge for the unseen ones. If we can find it, we can find the answer to breaking their hold. Sarah leaned in closer, her pulse quickening. Where is it? Carrick hesitated, his fingers trembling as he zoomed in on a small, distant star system. Here. But getting there will be a death sentence, without the right technology. The unseen ones will be watching. Sarah looked at the map, her mind already calculating the risks. There was no time, but she would go. They had no choice. We'll find this world, Sarah said, determination flooding her voice. We'll stop them, no matter what it takes. Carrick nodded, but his expression remained somber. This isn't just a fight for Earth anymore. This is a fight for the galaxy itself. And Sarah knew, deep in her bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. The wind howled through the ruins of what had once been the heart of Earth's capital city. Now it was nothing more than a battlefield. The streets littered with the wreckage of fallen ships and the twisted remains of soldiers who had given their lives for a future that seemed increasingly uncertain. Earth was in the throes of an invasion, and humanity's survival hung by the thinnest of threads. Colonel Sarah Blake stood atop a crumbling platform, staring down at the scene before her. The remnants of Earth's military, what little remained of it, had gathered in this last stronghold, a broken fortress hidden deep beneath the surface. The soldiers, though battle-worn and disheartened, had a fire in their eyes. They had no illusions about the situation, but there was one thing they understood above all else. Earth was their home, and they would fight for it to the bitter end. Colonel, a voice called out from behind her. Sarah turned to see Lieutenant Daniels, his face smeared with dirt and streaks of sweat, approaching with urgency in his step. That we've received the latest intel from the Northern Defense Base, he said, breathless. The Kreisel forces are splitting into two major groups. They're hitting our front lines hard, and we can't hold them off for much longer. The city's about to fall. Sarah took a moment to absorb the gravity of his words. The Kreisel weren't just attacking. They were carving their way through Earth's defenses with ruthless precision. It was only a matter of time before they would breach the final line. She clenched her jaw. We're not going to let that happen, Colonel, Daniels continued, his voice steady but tinged with concern. The remaining fleet is mobilizing, but it's not enough. The resistance forces have already pulled back to the west. If we don't act fast, they'll be overrun. A fire ignited within Sarah. There was no time to waste. Earth's forces were scattered, disorganized. But the war was not over yet. They still had one advantage, their resolve. They still had their humanity. And no one could take that from them. "Get me General Carrick," she ordered. "We're going to make our stand." By the time General Carrick arrived, Sarah had already mobilized the remaining forces. The command center, once a place of cool efficiency, now buzzed with frantic activity. Soldiers gathered around holographic displays, plotting their final moves. Earth's military might have been shattered, but its spirit had not broken. Carrick entered the room with a grim look in his eyes. His uniform was torn, a patch of red staining his sleeve, but his voice was unwavering. "Colonel, the resistance fighters are ready. We've trained them for this moment, even though they never thought it would come so soon. But you need to understand, this is more than just a defense. The Kreisel have pushed us to the edge. If we don't win this battle, Earth will fall." Sarah nodded, her gaze steely. "I know, but I've seen what humanity is capable of, and I won't let the Kreisel destroy everything we've built. It's time to show them that Earth is not a world they can take so easily." Carrick regarded her for a long moment, then nodded in agreement. "I've never seen a more determined leader. We'll follow you, Colonel. We'll fight for Earth." The sound of weapons being primed, ships launching, and soldiers marching filled the command center. It wasn't just a battle now, it was a revolution. A revolution led by humanity's indomitable will.as. Sarah led the charge across the wasteland toward the front lines. She couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they had one thing that the Kreisel could never understand: unity. Humanity's strength had always been in its ability to come together in the face of adversity. She raised her hand, signaling the attack. The resistance fighters, bolstered by Earth's last soldiers, surged forward. They hit the Kreisel front line with everything they had, utilizing every tactic, every scrap of technology, every bit of ingenuity they could muster. The Kreisel were formidable, their ships and ground forces designed to crush anything in their path. But the resistance fought with a desperation born of survival. They knew that if they failed, there would be no future for Earth. No future for humanity. Sarah fought alongside her soldiers, her blaster firing with precision as she cut down Kreisel invaders one by one. She saw the fierce determination in the eyes of the men and women around her, heard the battle cries of the fighters who refused to bow down, and felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. This was their last chance. If they could push the Kreisel back, they might stand a chance, but as the battle raged on, Sarah's heart sank as the Kreisel's reinforcements arrived. The alien forces poured into the battlefield like a tidal wave, and the human resistance was beginning to buckle under the pressure. Suddenly, a sharp cry rang out. "Colonel, they've breached the northern defense." Sarah's heart skipped. Damn it. She turned to Carrick, her face a mixture of resolve and frustration. "We need to buy them time, no matter the cost." Carrick nodded, grim determination on his face. "We'll hold the line here, but you need to go. Get to the resistance. Rally them for the final push. This is your fight, Sarah. We need you to lead them." Sarah didn't hesitate. She turned to her remaining soldiers. "Move out. We fight for Earth, no one else." With one last look at the battlefield, she ran toward the heart of the human resistance. Earth was not going down without a fight, and as long as Sarah Blake breathed, humanity would never surrender. The smoke hung heavy in the air, thick with a scent of scorched metal and burning flesh. Earth's cities had been reduced to rubble, the streets running with the remnants of a civilization on the brink of extinction. But in the heart of the chaos, Colonel Sarah Blake stood tall, unyielding. She wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. She was fighting for every future that had ever been dreamed on this planet. The Kreisel were relentless. Their forces had overwhelmed the northern defense lines, pushing humanity's last pockets of resistance into a final, desperate stand. The time for defense had passed. Now, It was a race to see who would endure, the invaders or the humans who refused to be erased. Sarah paced in front of the Resistance Command Center, now a hastily fortified bunker nestled deep beneath the wreckage of what had once been Earth's most powerful city. General Carrick and his remaining officers were finalizing their last-ditch strategies. She could hear the rumble of the enemy's war machines just outside the bunker, their sounds like the roar of a storm building to its peak. Colonel Carrick's voice cut through the noise, drawing her attention. His face was grim, his uniform bloodstained from hours of fighting. "We're out of options. The last of our forces are down to less than 10% of what we started with. We can't hold the city much longer, and the Kreisel aren't slowing down." Sarah turned to face him, her expression steely, unreadable. "We're not going to wait for them to finish us off. We have one last chance, General." Carrick frowned, glancing at the holographic map that flickered in front of them. "And what is that chance, Colonel?" "The Kreisel will wipe us out if we try to push forward. We're too spread thin." "That I'm not talking about pushing forward in the conventional sense," Sarah said, her voice hard and commanding. "I'm talking about hitting them where it hurts, their command center. We can't win if they keep their operations intact. We take them out, we disorient them, and we might just turn the tide." The room fell silent as Carrick considered her words. Around him, the remaining officers exchanged wary glances. It was a suicidal plan, but Sarah had learned long ago that sometimes the only option left was the most impossible one. "That we don't have the manpower for a direct assault," Carrick said quietly. "We don't need manpower," Sarah replied, her eyes flashing with determination. "We have the element of surprise. And we have something the Kreisel don't, the will to survive. I'm assembling a small strike force to infiltrate their command ship. We hit them where it counts." She could see the doubt in Carrick's eyes, but he didn't argue. He'd known her long enough to understand that once Sarah Blake made a decision, nothing would change her mind. "That what's the plan?" Carrick asked, his voice resigned but respectful. "That we'll use the underground tunnels to get close to their command ship. It's heavily guarded, but we've already located a weak point in their perimeter. Once we're inside, we'll plant the explosive charges and disable their central network. If we can't cripple them, we at least create enough confusion to give the rest of our forces a fighting chance." "You're talking about splitting up our forces even more," Carrick said, his voice thick with concern. "We can't afford to lose anyone else, though we don't have a choice," Sarah replied. "If we don't act now, we lose everything. Earth, our people, everything. If we do this right, we cripple their ability to fight back." Carrick's eyes softened, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He knew the risks. Everyone did. But he nodded, the grim acceptance settling in. "Then I'll lead the ground troops to provide cover," Carrick said. "You'll have your strike force. But know this, Colonel, we may never get another chance like this. If we fail, Earth falls with us." Sarah nodded, her gaze hardening. "Then we won't fail." The hours leading up to the strike felt like an eternity. Sarah stood at the front of a small, carefully selected team of soldiers, each one hardened by battle and driven by the same will to protect Earth. The rest of their forces would hold the line as long as possible, but this was the last, best hope for humanity's survival. They moved through the crumbling tunnels beneath the city, the walls dark and narrow. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the Kreisel command. The weight of the mission pressed down on Sarah, but she kept her focus. The stakes were higher than ever before. There would be no retreat as they reached the final checkpoint. Sarah signaled for the team to halt. The command ship loomed ahead, its sleek, alien design a stark contrast to the shattered ruins of the city surrounding it. The perimeter was heavily guarded, but the Kreisel were distracted by the ongoing conflict at the city's core. "It was their one chance. That on my signal," Sarah whispered. "We move fast. No hesitation." Her heart raced as she counted down in her mind. This was it. Their final shot to go. The team surged forward, darting from cover to cover, evading the watchful eyes of the Kreisel sentries. They reached the command ship's outer hull, where Sarah's explosives were placed. With a quiet beep, She activated the detonator. The explosion rocked the ship, sending tremors through the ground. The Kreisel Command Center was in chaos. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself a brief flicker of hope. "We've got them," she whispered. "Now let's finish this." The strike had begun, and for the first time since the invasion began, Earth had a fighting chance.